Laura's back. We're back.
We're back.
Two people dominate the news in chairs.
Not you and me.
No, not you and me.
Thank God for that.
It is astonishing two people in a two chairs picture as I've ever seen.
It's an incredible picture. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'm sure you'll see it splashed all over the newspapers tomorrow, Sunday. But we are recording on Saturday afternoon. And the images coming out of Pope Francis' funeral in Rome were extraordinary enough. But it is a photograph of Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky deep in conversation, sitting on two small red and gold chairs in the margins of the geometrically incredible marble of St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome.
And the world order is a changing geometry. They're saying things they both agree are historic. They've both tweeted. We're going to discuss what they've said in a day full of symbolism, solemnity and summitry on this Saturday newscast.
Hello, it's Laura in the studio.
It's Paddy in the studio.
And can I just say before we proceed, you are such an astonishing and pleasurable lexicon of a presenter and friend to work with. I hope everybody listening will agree.
That's a very, very nice way to welcome ourselves back. We better prove that we've got something interesting to say. I can't get over these pictures. I'm trying to find the words because it's a picture story.
It is a picture story, and a historic event. The funeral of a pope is always something incredible as a spectacle, and we've seen through the morning amazing shots filmed from helicopters over the eternal city of Rome, astonishing cardinal red colour streaking across the square in front of St. Peter's, world leaders lined up alongside also thousands and thousands and thousands of devout mourners who have arrived to pay their respects. And yet it is not those photographs of religious symbolism that I think are likely to capture the news headlines on their own. It will be the occasion of the meeting of these two men who are at the centre of a will they, won't they drama that affects a conflict that has destroyed so many lives, taken so many lives in Russia, Ukraine, and this meeting between the two men could prove a real turning point. But at this stage, it's very, very hard to tell. Although, as you said, Paddy, they have both been out there on social media.
Well, I'll read one. This is Volodymyr Zelensky. Good meeting. We discussed a lot one-on-one, hoping for results on everything we covered, protecting lives of our people, full and unconditional ceasefire, reliable and lasting peace that will prevent another war from breaking out. Very symbolic meeting that has potential to become historic if we achieve joint results. Thank you. POTUS, President of the United States.
And on arriving in Rome, which is when the American president tweeted, he hasn't yet tweeted, posted on Truth Social, which is what he does nowadays on his own social media platform. He wrote, just landed in Rome, a good day in talks with meetings with Russia and Ukraine. They are very close to a deal, and the two sides should now meet at very high levels to finish it off. Most of the major points are agreed to. We will be wherever is necessary to help facilitate the end to this cruel and senseless war. But to clarify, that was before the meeting of these two men rather than after, which Volodymyr Zelensky's post did take place after this meeting between the two.
So what's happening is that the Americans have gone face-to-face with the Russians, Putin, and the American envoy have met in Moscow.
Again, it wasn't for the first time Steve Witkoff met with Putin.
Went on for hours. Then the mayor of Kiev spoke to the BBC, and he said it is possible to conceive of a temporary land for peace deal. Anna Foster sat down with Klitschko. It's an amazing moment because you can see all the pieces aligning. If a senior Ukrainian says those words at the same time as the Russians and the Americans are meeting, and that Donald Trump is face-to-face, of all places, St. Peter's in Rome, then you do tell newscasters this is a weekend when there will have to be another big announcement. And that announcement could obviously be, I'm walking away, I can't believe it, it's absolutely awful. But you can't imagine there not being an announcement.
You can't imagine there not being something. But whether it is a something from Donald Trump later today on Truth Social, or whether it is something from another side of this, whether it is a comment from Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, or whether or not it's something later on from President Zelensky, or whether it's answered in another way with more strikes overnight.
Yes, which has
for
been
example,
happening.
which
That's the
has
other-
been happening as
Yeah.
allegedly the pace towards peace has been quickening, and then yet strikes have been continuing. But it comes back, doesn't it, to this central question that we've discussed so many times. Will Ukraine, under Zelensky, be able to accept giving up some of what they strongly, firmly, ardently believe and have been fighting to hold on to is part of their country? Or could they ever, even on a temporary basis, accept what the US appears to have put forward? JD Vance has been talking about it. The papers have been full of it. But, this suggestion that Ukraine should have to give up some of the land that Russia's taken since the invasion 3 years ago.
Also, I think what we all like about a good podcast, and the newscasters will judge if this is a good
I was going
podcast.
to say, does that apply to us or not?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to say it does, but what we all like about a good one is going behind the scenes a bit.
Yeah.
And you've been in the room with Volodymyr Zelensky
Yep.
just after the white heat of the catastrophic Oval Office. You've met his wife, and I just wonder what you can tell us from the tone of the message, the body language, the esprit of this moment compared to the very sunken man you met at the airport.
I think you can see in that one image, and it's a split-second shot, okay? And if you are listening to this and you haven't seen the image, Zelensky and Trump both have their heads bowed. He seems to be gesturing as if he's intently making a point. It is very difficult to imagine him, or indeed his incredibly articulate and credible and convincing wife, Olena Zelenska, saying, sure, you can have what you like. All this sacrifice was for nothing. Sure, we can hold and freeze the lines of the conflict, and Russia can have all that, even temporarily. And having been to Kiev, I've only been a couple of times, and so I don't want to overstate, my knowledge of covering that kind of conflict. But having spoken to both of them, spent more time speaking to her, it's incredibly difficult to imagine them saying, yeah, fine. We'll walk away, and Russia can hold on to some of our territory after all the blood and treasure that was spilled by their people.
And there's a piece in The Spectator, isn't there, saying it would be political suicide if he was to say that,
Correct.
possibly leading to a civil war.
Because that's always been his position. But it makes me wonder about a different theory that has been gaining some kind of traction. And I was interested to hear Anna's very interesting interview with Klitschko in this context, that maybe what the plan is here is a switch of Ukrainian leaders.
Really?
And perhaps there's an understanding that Zelensky could never deliver a deal like that because it would cut his own credibility off at the knees, because it would be so different to what he's been saying, including compared to that initial bravery of him staying in Kyiv when Putin thought he would take it in a day.
Yeah.
And that courage to go out and walk around the deserted city with just a few of his comrades saying, look, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. So, political calculus is a silly thing to predict. But as we speak now, it's very difficult to imagine Zelensky himself credibly accepting a deal. But remember, previously, he held out the possibility that if Ukraine was to get NATO membership, he would go. There's the question of security guarantee and all of these other things. So this is a very, very complicated jigsaw of factors.
I think we can say Zelensky's in play then. It's obviously, because of the way that he was treated in the White House, maybe he has to make a statement about elections and himself in return for security guarantees from all these. Maybe that's what's coming.
But we are speculating, and hopefully by the time we meet again tomorrow, we'll have more concrete information to give you. But also maybe not. This war may go on.
And then it all takes place in what we grew up learning about the Roman Empire and the way that the Roman world order was established, the rise and fall, decline and fall and decline of Rome. We spoke about this when we were small. Mm-hmm. And now we know the world order's changed. One of the first person to predict that was actually on your programme, the head of NATO, said it's all changed. So it's changed. Here are some of the most powerful people in the world meeting in Rome. And there was a sermon, a eulogy given, which seems to be laden with political meaning, where you decide for yourself. Here is part of Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re's eulogy during the service.
War, he said, results in the death of people and the destruction of homes, hospitals, and schools. War always, this is his own expression, war always leaves the world worse than it was before. It is always a painful and tragic defeat for everyone. Build bridges, not walls, was an exhortation he repeated many times, and his service of faith as successor of the Apostle Peter was always linked to the service of humanity in all its dimensions.
And the Cardinal there is talking about Pope Francis urging people to build bridges, not walls, which you can just imagine in the context of all these people being gathered in that astonishing building. And if you haven't been lucky enough to visit St. Peter's, I mean, it almost is like a wonder of the world. It's the most incredible place on any day of the year, let alone today, filled with world leaders, filled with cardinals, filled with ceremony and song and the chanting and the music and the sounds and sights. And you can just imagine that during that sermon, I mean, you probably couldn't hear a pin drop. I mean, hair's standing on end. And you just wonder what would have been going on in Volodymyr Zelensky's mind during that, in Donald Trump's mind during that, in other world leaders' mind too, because we know that Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, and Macron were both around the fringes of that tete-a-tete between Trump and Zelensky. There's an image of the four of them gathered together. And I just remember too, do you remember at the Notre Dame reopening?
Yes.
Trump, Zelensky, Macron went off for a meeting at the Élysée Palace. And it was at that moment where it appeared that there was some sort of very early on, at least suggestion of kind of mutual understanding between Trump and Zelensky after Trump's election campaign, when he'd so often said, oh, I can sort this out in a day. Oh, Ukraine needs to do this. Ukraine needs to do that. And here we are again with these ancient places providing the moments and world events, providing these opportunities for staging posts in these most fraught and difficult of political and diplomatic conversations.
The Notre Dame meeting led us into the wrong direction because we thought, this looks like Donald Trump's going to help Volodymyr Zelensky towards a deal which would be Russia in the sights of the US president. Whereas actually what then happened just weeks later was this catastrophic meeting in the Oval Office, at which it appears that the US team don't like the Ukrainians and the Russians can do nothing wrong. And they keep flip-flopping on that message. That's been the story of the last few weeks.
It certainly has. And we shouldn't forget, before Trump's election, there was concern in Ukraine and among Ukraine's allies that Donald Trump might go along with some of Russia's agenda here. What we have seen is evidence that Donald Trump has been going on with some of Russia's agenda here. Because up until Trump's return to the White House, the Western allies' position was, and I'm paraphrasing broadly, look, Ukraine shouldn't have to give up anything it doesn't want to, and we will back them for as long as we need to in order that they can carry on fighting. Of course, there was often bellyaching and reluctance to give them as much money and as much munitions and as much as they wanted. But broadly speaking, don't yell at me, broadly speaking, that was the position. As people in Ukraine and Western allies feared when Trump arrived in the White House, his position is different, that he wants this to stop. The world should find a way of ending this conflict. And that means that Ukraine will have to give up territory. And there ain't much sign of anything that he's expecting Russia to give up in return.
Yeah, and it all comes down to Crimea, which was annexed in 2014, which is when this war effectively began. Mm-hmm. The world was very upset about it, didn't really do anything, didn't send any arms. Instead, it did some sanctions. But it's really thought that gave Putin the green light 10, 11 years ago, and thus it's continued with this horrible slaughter. And this weekend, lo and behold, Zelensky's tweeted what he's tweeted, or he's posted what he's posted. They're all meeting together, and it looks like we expect announcements. That is exactly what we have to say as we record it. Now, there's a bit more to bring, which is that it's worth saying that additionally, you said there'd been missiles fired and drones. Also, Putin is reporting to the world he's taken back the Kursk region, the border region, which Ukraine had sensationally taken a few months ago. He says he's now got that back. But it puts you in mind, really, of what we've often said here. Wars mostly end round a table. There are some amazing exceptions in history, but the questions you need to ask is where's the table and who's at the table? Donald Trump is appealing for Putin and Zelensky to come together now. He says they must get together. The two sides must get together at the highest level.
And do you remember, to go back to that Notre Dame meeting, that some months later then we were talking about this and I was writing about this, it was said to me at that point, what Trump said to Zelensky and Macron is, I can get Putin to the table.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been that much evidence of that actually happening yet. He's met his envoy. But the implication of I can get someone to the table is that, oh, I can get them to do something. You know, getting someone to the table, yes, of course, partly it's about coming and actually parking your butt in a seat and being prepared to talk. But coming to the table, in a normal diplomatic sense, would indicate a willingness to give something up. And there still isn't, and we've heard, you know, the excellent Steve Rosenberg talk about this a lot in the news on the last week, there still isn't evidence here that Russia's willing to do anything beyond potentially stopping the conflict
at the line,
if they get what they want, if they get the line, you know, if they're allowed to hold territory that they've seized. And it is extraordinary. We should say this explicitly. Things have changed a lot in the last 7 days. Trump, whether he sticks to this or not is a different question, but he told Time magazine that was published yesterday that Crimea will stay with Russia. That's his quote. It will stay with Russia. So there's no secret now about what the US appears to be asking for here.
So we really stand in the advantage, the people in the advantage position are newscasters listening in the future, because I think we've summed up as best we can very striking photographs, very big symbolism, very big words. And really what we're doing is making an audio version of some of the most historic photographs of the last few years. Mm-hmm. And we're really standing, you know, jealously, I think, thinking of all the people who get to take these photos and look at them.
And maybe by the time we meet tomorrow, we will have more information about what was actually said and what it might mean, because actually it does feel to me like anything could happen. You know, we've been on this roller coaster in a news sense for a long time now, since Trump's been back in the White House. The Ukraine, weren't they? The astonishing Oval Office exchanges. Then the night when Zelensky was here in London, and I was lucky enough to go and be at that meeting where he was speaking to a few journalists. There've been so many sort of mini dramas since Trump's been back in the White House over Ukraine. And it appeared, actually, didn't it, just a couple of weeks ago, that he might have been losing interest in Ukraine a bit. Do you remember that was the sort of sensible, that there was some sort of verbiage and learned commentary around that saying, well, Trump is actually losing interest in Ukraine. Because
well, the team said he'll have to walk away. You know, if necessary, he's busy, he's a busy guy. Mm-hmm. He's not going to go our way. The way of a peace deal, will just walk away. That was said explicitly.
So that may yet happen, right?
That may yet
happen.
It may yet happen.
So what are you doing tomorrow?
So, well, we will definitely be chasing down a senior Ukrainian government spokesperson to tell us what is the position.
Okay.
And then I think we would hope that the British government will be announcing something as well. We're also very interested in the symbolism and the history of people meeting in Rome, talking about power and where the lines on maps are.
Maybe we should go on a mini break. Then we have got Pat McFadden, who is the Prime Minister's right-hand man, joining us ahead of the local elections, along with Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, and Carla Denyer, the co-leader of the Greens, because the local elections are coming thick and fast this Thursday. They're mayoral elections too, and the first by-election of this new parliament. And it looks to me like both the big parties are going to have a pretty horrible time. So we'll be talking about some of that tomorrow. I love an election week, even if it's just local elections. I just get very excited about it. I love staying up all night on Thursdays. Please, newscasters, some of you stay up with me. Please.
You are beaming as you say the word elections.
So sad, isn't it? Just it was exciting. It's the moment when actually politicians who all the time we think, they're so powerful. And then on election day, they've got no power at all. They're just sitting waiting like everyone else. And I love that sense that this is the fundamental nature of democracy. It's handed over to all of us, if you're in England and you live in one of the areas where you'll have a vote this week, to get your little stubby pencil and put it across in a box. And I find that very moving.
I can tell. I mean, even the idea of a stubby pencil is getting you. stopping watching the streaming services.
What's also stopping me watching the streaming services, in about half an hour, I'm going to be talking to Martin Freeman and Jack Lowden, and that'll be on our show tomorrow. That's very exciting.
That is great news.
It's very exciting. So Jack Lowden, who he said he's bored of being asked about whether it's going to be the next James Bond. So newscasters, I can tell you tomorrow whether or not I was brave enough to try to combat his boredom of being asked about James Bond and ask him about James Bond. And maybe I'll ask Martin Freeman if he might be the next James Bond if Jack Lowden finds the notion of that too boring.
You could get it in code.
What would the code
kind of
be?
Martini he likes.
Yes. Oh, that's good. That's quite fun.
Although that's gone now, hasn't it? The films don't like all that Martini. Make it any way you like.
Make it any way you like.
Right, let's go.
Maybe you should be the next James Bond.
Yes, that's just what the franchise needs. It's definitely the end now of Newscast. Please join us tomorrow when much more will be known.
I was quite really warming up to a theme there.
I'm trying to shut that down.
That's a shame. I want to say very good luck to any newscasters who are running the London Marathon, you crazy, crazy people.
And the Manchester one at the same time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And will anybody be fast enough to have finished by the time we gather again tomorrow?
Only our
Looking
team
through
member.
the glass. So, newscasters, if you're running the London Marathon, very good luck. If you're cheering someone on watching the London Marathon, then actually go on, email us, newscast@bbc.co.uk, and then tomorrow morning we can share our newscast gold, silver, bronze medals, and maybe Paddy will run it in a tuxedo with a martini shaker.
Goodbye.
Bye.